The time has come, the prophecy fulfilled, the fires of judgment
Is the book of Hebrews 6 and 17 get right to the point, wherein the Heavenly Father, or God, which his name is Yahweh, his son's name is Yahushai, wherein God willing more abundantly to show unto the heirs of promise. Who's that? That's the nation of Israel, begin with the elect. The heirs of promise here means someone who's set to inherit something. The first thing we're going to inherit, those of us that are part of the elect, is salvation by Yahushai into those chariots. Then we're going to inherit those new bodies that the Apostle Paul talked about. As a matter of fact, the Apostle Paul said in 1 Corinthians 15, we shall be changed in the twinkling of an eye. Like that, we're going to get these new indestructible bodies. In other words, we're never going to die. Death is going to be a thing of the past. So we're going to be like gods. Psalms 82 and 6. We're going to have godlike powers in the flesh. We're going to have godlike powers in the flesh. I just gave you a couple of examples of what we're set to inherit. That's why it says heirs of promise. So let's read it again. Wherein the Heavenly Father willing more abundantly to show unto the heirs of promise, and hopefully that's us, the immutability of his counsel. Now let's look up that word. That's a big word, man. Immutability. Let's define that word. Immutability comes from the word immutable. It says unchanging over time or unable to be changed. So the Heavenly Father's word is unable to be changed. It cannot change.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai Bahashem, Rakah Kodash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples to his younger brothers. And peace and blessing, salutation to the hopeful elect out there pushing his word in truth and in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai Bahashem, Rakah Kodash. And double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who teach well, rule well, being great examples to his younger brothers. And peace and blessing, salutation to the hopeful elect. All right, and what I want to get into in this lesson, dealing with the builders, okay, which are the prophets, okay, and this lesson was inspired by a precept in the book of Isaiah, chapter 58 and verse 11, okay. So when you read the book of Isaiah, chapter 58, verse 11, and it says, and the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushua shall guide thee continually, and satisfy thy soul in drought, and make thou fat, and such like, and make fat thy bones, and thou shalt be like a watered garden, and like a spring of water whose water fails not. Okay, so the Lord likens, his people, into a garden, and his word is likened to water. For the longest time, we was a garden without water, dried up. You see, we was completely dried up as a people. Okay, we had no water, we had no truth. Okay, we didn't have the spirit, so we were spiritually dehydrated, going into those dead bones, because a garden with no water, okay, is dead, it's useless. You see, There has to be water for life. Okay. So scriptures speak about us, being, dead, okay, in the streets of spiritual Egypt and Sodom, which is speaking of America, okay, for 3 days and a half, which is those 350 years from the time of 1619, from when the Southern Kingdom started being, okay, transported over here to the Americas with the northern tribes for captivity. Okay, they began the countdown of those 350 years leading up to 1969. Okay, the 1970 era when High Priest Elder Abba Bivens, okay, which was John the Baptist and Elijah coming back, all right, in his lot, all right, to kickstart the ministry of the prophets, the builders, okay. And when he began to teach, all right, Yahushua, okay, it was just like Moses in the wilderness tapping that rock in the desert, okay. It became a water source, okay, for the hopeful elect, which is likened unto a garden, okay. So the Lord began to water his garden, all right, the hopeful elect with his word, okay, and it's going to fit, and his water is going to fail not, okay. This water is going to accomplish everything that the Lord intended it to accomplish, man. There's a remnant that's being cultivated, all right, in righteousness, man, through the preaching of his word, okay, and it's accomplishing everything that the Lord has on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, from the destruction aspect to the salvation aspect, okay. This word is accomplishing everything, man. That's why you go here. Let's get this, Deuteronomy 32. All right. It's the book of Deuteronomy 32 in chapter 1. Verse 1. All right. Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 1. It says, "Give ear, O ye heavens, and I will speak, and hear, O earth, the words of my mouth. My doctrine shall drop its rain, my speech shall distill its dew." You see that? So doctrine is dropping its rain. Okay, that's what the garden, all right, the hopeful elect of Israel is being watered with is doctrine, true doctrine, man. Okay, which is likened to water. All right, it says, "My speech shall distill as the dew, as the small rain upon the tender herb, and as the showers upon, all right, the grass." Okay, as the showers upon the grass. You see, so the tender herbs is the elect, okay, and the grass, and we're being showered, okay, with this word, okay, and we're springing up, as the scriptures say. You see, there's a remnant that has sprung up in the earth, okay. To now, we went from, it went from, as the scriptures say, a mustard seed was planted, to now where it's the biggest herb. Okay, you plant a mustard seed, and eventually a mustard seed becomes, the biggest tree, the biggest of all herbs, the greatest of all herbs. Okay, it says, "Because I will publish the name of the Lord, Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, ascribe you greatness unto our power," and that's a part of the doctrine, is the name. Okay, and we're, all right, ascribing, okay, we're explaining the greatness of our power. What he's done, what he's doing, and what he's going to do. Okay, all in the name of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. Okay, you go here. Let's get this real quick in Isaiah. In 59. I think it's 50. Might be 56. Let me see. Yeah, this is on Isaiah 55 and 10. Okay, it said for as the rain coming down, you see that, and the snow from heaven, and returneth not thither, but watereth the earth, and maketh it bring forth and bud. You see, the elect has budded in the earth. And see, this is another problem for Esau. Okay, because a part of his narrative is that you have a, a chosen people from amongst them. Okay, these small hands, Amalekites. Okay, and that's one of the deceptions. Okay, of this world order is that there's a chosen people from amongst them. These Amalekites, man. You know, they pretend to be us, the imposters, man. Okay, so as the true people have been awakened by this word, have been watered and begin to bring forth and bud. Okay, now the truth is bearing fruit. Okay, this is a problem for Esau's narrative going forward. Okay, and this is a part of the reason why we see this man rushing this NWO. It said that it may give seed to the sower and bread to the eater. Okay, so seed to the sower, which is the prophets, and bread to the eater, which is the church. Okay, because the prophets, okay, are like husbandmen. Okay, which is they tend to the garden. Okay, they cultivate gardens. Okay, and also like into what a builder, as we're gonna go into. You see, well, let's get one more real quick, and then we'll go to the next verse in Isaiah. So you go here to the book of Sirach, chapter 28. Okay, this is I'll start at verse 29. Sirach, chapter 24, verse 29. It said, "For her thoughts are more than the sea, and her counsels profounder than the great deep." Yeah, and this is this wisdom. You know, which this wisdom is the counsel of the Lord. The wisdom of the scriptures is the counsel, all right, of Yahweh by Shema Shai. All right, that's why that's why we're able to understand, okay, the things of the earth, the things that are happening. You see, prophecy gives us insight through this wisdom, through this understanding. Okay, we're able to understand the secrets. You see, so this counsel from on high, right, which is likened unto this rain, okay, is giving us clarity in everything, man. Counsel on how to move, how to be, okay, in these times. All right. It says, "I also came out as a brook from a river, and as a conduit into a garden." Okay. So this word, okay, is flowing, okay, into the garden. Okay, which this garden is, okay, the elect. "I said I will water my best garden." You see that? All right, the elect, man. "And I will water abundantly my garden bed, and lo, my brook became a river, and my river became a sea." Okay, so this word has been expanded, from a brook to a river unto a sea. That means what? Growth. Okay, the elect are being flooded with truth. Okay, the world is being flooded with truth. Only the elect, okay, will be able to absorb this truth and come to life in the spirit. Okay, it says, I will yet make doctrine, all right, to shine as the morning." Okay, so doctrine, going back, everything is rooted back to doctrine. That's the water, all right, it's the living waters. "And I will send forth her light afar off, and I will yet pour out doctrine as prophecy." Okay, prophecy is at the forefront of the doctrine. Okay, speaking what's to come. Okay, because what's to come is great tribulation, but in the midst of that, there's a great deliverance. Okay, so let's read on. "So I will yet pour out doctrine as prophecy, and leave it for all ages. Behold, that I have not labored for myself only, but for all them that seek wisdom." Okay, so this scripture called, what we're doing is a labor of love, and our forefathers, they labored. All right, the spirit was on them. Okay, to have these prophecies scribed down, this these accounts, okay, this collection of writings that we know is the Bible. They labored. This was a labor to put this together. Okay. And they left it, all right, behind for all ages, man, as we would be awakened to the understanding, okay, of their labor. We have awakened to the understanding, all right, of labor, okay. The prophets of old put in, our forefathers put in righteousness, man, inspired by Yahweh by Shema Shai. Okay. So let's go back. Let's go here now, dealing with Isaiah 58 again. So let's go here. Isaiah 58:11 and read 12. It says, "In the Lord, Yahweh by Shema Shai shall guide thee continually and satisfy thy soul in drought and make fat thy bones, and thou shalt be like a watered garden and like a spring of water whose waters fail not." Okay? So his word is not going to fail us, man. All right, the Lord is going to accomplish his word. There's going to be provisions in the time of scarcity. There's going to be power, okay, in times of need, okay. We're going to be defended, all in this word, man. Also going to be delivered on those chariots, man, from the great destruction, okay. Even those that die in Yahushua, they have to be martyred. Well, they're going to be resurrected on those chariots, okay, immortal, okay. Isaiah 58:12, it says, "And they that shall be of thee," okay, it says, "And they that shall be of thee shall build the old waste places," okay, which are the prophets, because the prophets are what? Of their people, Israel. So from amongst Israel, there will be builders, the prophets. They will begin to teach this word, okay, and begin to build up, okay, the hopeful elect, the house of David. "Thou shalt raise," man, because for many generations, our people, okay, was helpless, man. Like I said, we was dry bones. Okay, we were spiritually famished, man. We was, we've been desolate as a people, man. We've been torn down, captivity tore us down, man. To ruins. You see? So out of the ruins, the Lord, would awaken builders, the prophets, to begin to build by this word, man. Okay? And begin to repair, okay, this fallen house. "And thou shalt be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of paths to dwell in." Okay, of paths, it goes with your conduct, your way of life, to dwell in. And through this word, we're beginning to dwell in obedience. Okay, but this word is a repairer, it's a restorer. So the Lord has tasked his men to be builders. Okay, that's why when you go here, let's get the book of Amos. All right, this is the book of Amos, chapter 9, in verse 11. It says, "In that day, I will raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen." Okay, so the Lord, this is a promise. The tabernacle of David is being raised up, is being reared up, is being restored, which is the elect, house of the beloved. All right, but yeah, all right, Dawadah, house of the beloved. Okay, it says, "And close up the breaches thereof, and I will raise up his ruins, and I will build it as in the days of old." Okay, so the Lord is repairing, okay, his house, which is the remnant, the hopeful elect. We're being repaired by this word. We're being built up. Okay, that's why when you go here, let's go here to because the scriptures speak about, edification. Okay, so when you go to Romans, let's just go here, Romans 14. Okay, as we teach to edify, well, let's go into that word. So this is Romans 14:9. Might be 19. Yeah, Romans 14:19 said, "Let us therefore follow after the things which make for peace, and things wherewith one may edify another." Okay, so let us therefore follow after things which make for peace. Okay, so we're following after the things, all right, that make for peace, which is this word, man. This word, okay, sets an atmosphere for peace. Okay, in order to what? So we can build a piece of peace within. Because we have tribulation in this world, where there's a peace within, okay, that begins to overcome this world, overcome the affliction, the setbacks, or whatever. Okay, so this word produces a peace within. You see, it says, "In things wherewith one may edify another." All right, and we teach these words for the sake of edification. This is why we teach. Okay, this is why we're not here with the gimmicks that don't build. Okay, it doesn't build you up in the spirit. If it doesn't build you up in the spirit, then it's vain. It's empty. Okay, showing you around, my house, and the reality TV show, selling you merchandise and all this. See, that's not the spirit of edification. Okay, that doesn't build you up in the spirit. This word being watered. Okay, so you get this word edify.
Strong's G 3619, oikadame, oikadame.
Okay, which when you go into it, it says what? It says building, a building up. Okay, a building or building up. It says edifying, edification. It said the act of one who promotes another's growth. They say Christian, but we know, all right, in the true wisdom, okay, in the true doctrine, okay, following Yahushua, okay, piety, happiness, and holiness. It says a building, i.e., the thing built to edify. Okay, so this word is meant to build up the elect. Okay, it goes into what? Architecture, you see, a structure, building. Okay, so the house of David, which is, all right, the hopeful elect, is being built up. Okay, that's why you go here to let's get this in 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse, all right, 5. It says, "Ye also as lively stones are built up a spiritual house." You see that? Are built up a spiritual house and holy priesthood. Okay, because now we're operating in this grace period. As we rehearse the righteous acts, we're also rehearsing the order of Melchizedek, where the priesthood, okay, is open up to all tribes, the men of all tribes. Okay, so the men of the hopeful elect, all right, the men whom the Lord has called to teach, to build. Okay, we're operating as a holy priesthood, a separated priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices, man. Okay, so now we're able to offer spiritual sacrifices. Okay, these camps, they're spiritual altars. Okay, these lessons, this is like a priest, doing a sacrifice, man. These things are what acceptable to the Most High by Yahushua HaMashiach, which is the high priest in the heavens. Okay, so our prayers, are being heard. These lessons, these things are being offered up to the Heavenly Father, and they're being accepted through Yahushua. Okay, the Father is accepting these sacrifices through Yahushua. Okay, so we're those lively stones. Okay, and we're building up a spiritual house. Okay, so we're being restored. See, the Lord has, because like going back into it, a plant can be drooping down, but after a good rain, that plant can be restored. You see, so we're like that, that plant, okay, that was revived, through this water, man. It had been it perks back up. Certain plants, it be a couple of days and no water, man, it begins to droop and wither, okay. But a good rain, have it, perking back up, man. Okay, and that's how this word affected the elect, man. So we're getting that, that latter rain, right before the harvest. Okay, we're being built up, we're being made solid by this word. Okay, even you go here to let's go here to 1 Corinthians 3. Yep. Go back to gardener. It goes into both. 1 Corinthians 3 and 6 says, I have planted, Apollos watered, but the Most High gave the increase. You see that? So, you have, as our people come into the truth, they might hear this word, from from one camp. They might just catch one camp, watch that camp, and then segue to another camp. So wherever you hear this word, that's what you got planted. You might get planted by one camp and then go to this camp or go to this brother, and begin, latch on to this brother and become watered. But it's the Most High that gives the increase. So when you first hear this true doctrine, that's a seed being planted. And then you gravitate to, certain camps, certain brothers and get watered. Okay, but it's the Most High that gives the increase. He controls the growth. Okay, which we all should be growing. Okay, but the rate in which we grow, okay, is all according to the Most High. You see, it says so then neither he that planted. All right, it said neither. So then neither is he that planted anything, neither he that watered, but the Most High that giveth the increase, man. Because this is all inspired by the Spirit of Yahweh Shem Yahushua. The scriptures speak about how, this wisdom is a pure influence from on high. So the driving force behind, the prophets being able to build, being likened to husbandmen in the garden. Okay, well, the inspiration, the driving force behind it is Yahweh Bashem Al-Shah. This is not of ourselves, man. This is not from us. We're not the source of this, man. We're a tool, we're a vessel that's being used. Okay, as a husbandman, as a builder. Okay, it says, now he that planteth and he that watereth are one. Okay, because at the end of the day, we're all in the same spirit. All the camps, all the brothers in camps, we're in the same spirit of Yahweh. So we're all of one spirit that's teaching this word. So why we teach the same thing. Okay, and it says, and every man shall receive his own reward according to his own labor. Okay, so every brother has been assigned to labor, man. All right, to water the garden, teaching his word. Okay, to edify, to build up, which is teaching his word. Okay, so we all been assigned to a labor in this thing, man. Okay, we're here to labor. Right, all these different camps, each brother, they have their own channel to do their own labor. We labor together, and then we have our own labor. And even when we're laboring as an individual, it's still for the collective whole. Okay, so verse 9, it says, for we are laborers together with the Most High. Ye are the Most High's husbandry. Ye are the Most High's building. You know, so he called the prophets to be the laborers, okay, of the garden. You know, it's just a tedious thing. Okay, to cultivate crops, man. You got the prune, you got the, all right, get rid of weeds. Okay, you got the hedge your garden, protected from rodents. You see, by protecting the flock from false doctrine. Okay, things rising up amongst, the body got to be cut out. You see, certain things got to be cut back. So it's a tedious job when you go into husbandry, man. You know, it's a tedious job when you go into building, because building you have to, so it's a lot of measuring. You got to measure things out, getting things square, getting things level. Okay, it's a tedious thing, but it's a labor of love. So the doctrine, why the doctrine, you see the apostles and elders, they're heavy, okay, on correct doctrine, man. Being on point, being accurate. When you're building, you have to be accurate when you're building. Okay, so it says, according to the grace of the Most High, which is given unto me as a wise master builder. Okay, as a wise master builder, I have laid the foundation, and another builded thereon. But let every man take heed on how he builded thereon. Okay, so we take heed to how we build. This is it's not a light thing. Teaching His word is not a light thing. Okay, it's ain't for just anyone to jump out there. Okay, and proclaim, to be a teacher. No, you got to be sent. You got to be ordained. Okay, through the Spirit, you got to go through the process, man, being built up by other teachers, and then we go and teach, man. We're built up. We have to be disciples of this word. We have to be disciplined. Okay, go through the correct process, and then we begin to teach. And we got to be careful how we build. We fact check information we bring out. Okay, if there's if there's a correction needed, corrections are made. Brothers, correct each other on camera, all the time, because it's about, their right measurement, their right, everything gotta be level, squared, as we build. Okay. So let's yep. So let's go here. All right. So we in the time of the Lord's house. Okay. It's time to build. You see. So you go here when the Lord commissioned, the priests, and hired the men of Israel to build the second temple. We had to go send Haggai, all right, to light a fire under their ass, man. And the brothers always tell the story how, the apostles, when they came on the scene through YouTube, they lit their fire for brothers to go out and teach, man. Okay, and that was you could tell that was directly from Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai. Okay, telling the builders to go and build. I hear the brothers tell their story all the time. The brothers that was around at the beginning of YouTube, 2007, 2008, 2009. Certain men have been around since then. They speak of how the disciples, it's like how the apostles, the Spirit, they told the brothers, and they said, hey, they lit a fire under the men that was listening, man, to go teach, to go build. Okay, and it similarly reminds me of this account in the book of Haggai 1:1. In the second year of Darius the king, in the 6th month, in the first day of the month, came the word of the Lord by Haggai, the prophet, unto Zerubbabel, all right, the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, And to Joshua, son of Josedek, the high priest, saying, thus speaketh the Lord Yahweh Bashim al-Shah of hosts, saying, this people say, the time is not come, the time that the Lord house shall not be built. Okay, because Jake was BSing, man. You know, Jake had got comfortable. You see, they had got the decree to build, then they had got the the money from the treasury of the Medo-Persian Empire. Okay. And it said, then came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet, saying, is it time for you, all right, O ye, to dwell in your sealed houses, okay, and this house lie waste, okay, the house of the Lord, the remnant, okay, because we was in waste as a people. We was lying in waste, man, in Christianity, all right, thugs, hoes, and whatever. We just out of there, man. We lie waste, okay. Black culture, whatever. We was in ruins. We was in waste. Okay. But then the apostles lit their fire. They was in the spirit that came in the spirit of Haggai, man. Okay, said now therefore, thus said the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. Okay. And ever since then, the YouTube, okay, the builders have been activated, man. The builders have been awakened, okay, and have gone forth to build. Okay, and the house of the Lord, is being restored. The remnant is being restored through this word. The garden is coming back to life through this water, this word, man. Okay, so that was the point. Just wanted to get into that, Lord will. You brothers and you sisters edified once again. I want to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shah Bahashem, Rakakadash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great example to us younger brothers. And peace and blessings, salutations to the hopeful elect. Shalom.